The council chamber was quiet. Too quiet. Ambassador Kyle Morrison stood in the center of the massive room and looked around at the alien faces staring back at him. There were hundreds of them. Some looked like giant insects. Others were made of glowing energy. A few were so strange that human eyes could barely understand what they were seeing. Kyle kept his face calm. He had practiced this moment many times. His hands were relaxed at his sides. His breathing was steady, but inside his heart was racing. What he was about to say would change everything. High Chancellor Vex sat at the highest seat in the chamber. He was a Crithian, a species that had been running galactic politics for thousands of years. His four eyes studied Kyle carefully. The Crithians were known for being smart. They could talk their way out of any problem. They had ended wars that seemed impossible to stop. They had made peace between enemies who did not even breathe the same air. But they had never met anyone quite like humans. The problem started 3 months ago. A species called the Zelthians had taken over a human colony world. The planet was called New Portland. It was home to 40,000 humans. Most of them were farmers. They grew food and worked on making the planet better for human life. They were peaceful people. They had no army. They had no weapons. The Zelthians came with warships. They landed soldiers on New Portland and told the humans that the planet belonged to them now. The Zelthians said they had old maps. These maps showed that the planet was theirs a long time ago. It did not matter that humans had been living there for 20 years. It did not matter that the Zelthians had never even visited that part of space until now. The Galactic Council was supposed to fix problems like this. That was their whole job. When two species had a fight, the Council would bring them together. They would talk. They would look at evidence. They would make compromises. Eventually, everyone would agree on a solution. It usually took a long time, but it worked. Or at least that is what everyone believed. The humans followed all the rules. They filed complaints with the council. They showed up to every meeting. They presented evidence that New Portland was legally theirs. They brought witnesses. They showed documents. Kyle himself had spent 6 weeks sitting in this same chamber arguing the human case. The Zelthians argued back. They had their old maps. They had historians who said the planet was traditionally Zelthian territory. They had lawyers who knew every detail of galactic law. The arguments went on and on. Meanwhile, 40,000 humans lived under Zelthian occupation. They could not leave. They could not go back to their normal lives. They just had to wait while aliens in a faraway council chamber debated about who owned their home. Then, 6 weeks into the process, Kyle made his announcement. He stood in front of the council and said something that shocked everyone. The humans were done talking. They would not come to any more meetings. They would not argue their case anymore. They were withdrawing from the diplomatic process completely. The council could not believe it. Species did not just walk away from negotiations. That was not how things worked. If you stopped talking, that meant war. And war was what the council existed to prevent. Vex had called emergency meetings. He sent messages to Earth. He contacted human colonies across the galaxy. He tried to reach human military commanders. Every message got the same response. The humans would send a polite reply that said nothing useful. They would not explain. They would not negotiate. They just stopped talking. Now Kyle was back in the council chamber. Vex leaned forward in his tall chair. His voice came through the translation system that let all the different species understand each other. Ambassador Morrison, I must ask you again. Why have you abandoned the diplomatic process? Do you not understand how dangerous this is? Kyle looked directly at the High Chancellor. We understand perfectly, he said. His voice was calm and clear. That is exactly why we stopped talking. Confused sounds filled the chamber. Aliens whispered to each other in 100 different languages. The translation system could not keep up with all of them at once. A Zelthian representative stood up. His name was Krath. He looked like a giant armored bug with too many legs. Your colony broke our territorial laws, Krath said. His voice was angry. We followed all the correct procedures. We filed the proper documents. We have every legal right to control that space. Kyle did not even look at him. He kept his eyes on Vex. High Chancellor, I am here as a courtesy. I came to inform the Council of recent events. What events? Vex demanded. His four eyes were focused completely on Kyle now. Kyle pulled out a small device and activated a holographic display. Images appeared in the air above the council floor. They showed New Portland, but something was different. The Zelthian ships that had been in orbit were gone. The Zelthian soldiers that had been on the ground were gone. Human colonists were walking freely through their towns. As of 6 o'clock this morning, Kyle said, New Portland has been liberated. All Zelthian military forces in that system have been removed. The human colonists are returning to their normal lives. The chamber exploded with noise. Every species started shouting at once. Some were angry. Some were scared. Some were just confused. Vex tried to call for order, but nobody was listening. Krath was standing on his seat now, all his legs waving in the air. "This is an act of war," he screamed. "You attacked us without warning, without even trying to negotiate." Kyle finally turned to look at the Zelthian. "We gave you 6 weeks to leave peacefully. You chose to stay. We chose to remove you. But the council was still deliberating," Krath said. "We were in the middle of the legal process." "Yes," Kyle said, "you were. And during that entire process, you got to keep our planet. You got to control 40,000 human lives. You got to profit from our resources. All while lawyers argued about ancient maps. We decided that was unacceptable." Vex finally got the chamber quiet enough to speak. "Ambassador Morrison, you must understand the precedent this sets. If species can simply use military force instead of diplomacy, the entire system collapses. We will return to the chaos of the old days. Wars everywhere. Millions dead." Kyle stood very still. He let the silence stretch out for a moment before answering. "High Chancellor, your system was already broken. It just took humans to point it out. When the aggressor gets to keep what they stole while you talk, that is not diplomacy. That is just slow conquest with legal paperwork." He gestured to the holographic display, which now showed statistics. "Your council has mediated over 200 territorial disputes in the last century. On average, each one took more than 3 years to resolve. And in 83% of cases, the species that moved first, the aggressor, got to keep at least some of what they took. Your system rewards the bold and punishes the patient." "That is an oversimplification," Vex said. But he did not sound certain anymore. "Is it?" Kyle asked. "Because from where humanity stands, your system looks like it was designed by species who benefit from long negotiations. Species who can afford to wait years for a decision. Species who have nothing to lose while the talking continues." The chamber was completely silent now. Every representative was listening carefully. "We are a young species," Kyle continued. "We have only been in galactic politics for 30 years. But in that time, we have learned something important. We learned that if we play by your rules, we lose. Because your rules were not made for species like us. They were made for species who have been here so long that they can afford to be patient." "So what do you propose?" Vex asked quietly. Kyle's expression hardened. "We propose something simple. Do not take what belongs to humanity. Because if you do, we will not negotiate for its return. We will not spend years in this chamber arguing about ancient claims and legal interpretations. We will simply take it back immediately with overwhelming force." "That is madness," Vex said. "You would turn the galaxy into a war zone." "No," Kyle said. "We would make aggression too costly to attempt. Right now, the cost of taking someone's territory is sitting through some meetings. We are making the cost much higher. We are making it immediate and painful. We believe that will prevent wars, not cause them." Kyle looked around the chamber at all the alien faces. Some looked angry. Some looked scared. Good, he thought. They should be both. This council was built on talking, Kyle said. On negotiation and compromise. Those are good things, but they only work when both sides negotiate in good faith. When one side uses the process as a weapon, when they use your rules to protect their aggression, then the process itself becomes the problem. Humanity will not participate in a broken system. We will fix it. Or we will work outside it. The choice, High Chancellor, is yours. He turned and walked out of the chamber. Behind him, the council erupted into chaos once again. But Kyle did not look back. He had said what needed to be said. Now they would see if the galaxy was ready to change. The emergency council session had been going for 8 hours straight. Vex looked at the holographic displays that floated in front of him. They showed detailed information about what had happened at New Portland. The more he looked, the more worried he became. The human military fleet had appeared without any warning. One moment, the Zelthian forces controlled the system. The next moment, 17 human warships arrived from faster-than-light travel. They did not send messages demanding surrender. They did not threaten or make speeches. They just started fighting. The entire battle lasted less than 4 hours. 17 Zelthian warships were destroyed or damaged so badly they could not fight. 4 orbital defense platforms were blown apart. The Zelthian ground forces on New Portland surrendered quickly when they realized no help was coming. What scared Vex was not that the humans won. Wars happened. Species fought sometimes, even with the Council trying to stop them. What scared him was how easily the humans won, how perfectly they executed their attack, how completely they dominated an enemy that should have been their equal. Vex called for a private meeting with his military advisors. 3 of them came to his personal office. Admiral Court was the first to speak. He was an old soldier from a species called the Vexillians. He had fought in many battles during his long life. "Chancellor, this changes everything," Court said. His voice was grim. "The humans are not what we thought they were." "Explain," Vex ordered. Court activated a tactical display. "Watch carefully. This is how the human fleet approached New Portland." The display showed the 17 human ships arriving in the system. They came out of faster-than-light travel in perfect formation. Then they did something unusual. They did not rush toward the enemy. They did not try to intimidate them with displays of power. They simply moved to specific positions around the system. In the first 30 seconds of combat, the Zelthian command ships lost all their communications equipment. They could not talk to each other. They could not coordinate their defenses. Then their point defense systems were destroyed. These were the weapons that protected them from missiles and fighters. Without these systems, they were vulnerable. Next, the humans targeted the power systems on each Zelthian ship. Not the engines, not the weapons, the power distribution networks. It was incredibly precise shooting. Within 5 minutes, the Zelthian fleet was crippled. Their ships still existed, but they could barely function. This was not random, Court said. The humans knew exactly where to shoot. They had mapped every weakness in the Zelthian defenses. They knew which systems to hit and in what order. This kind of intelligence takes time to gather. Vex felt a cold feeling spread through his body. "You mean they were gathering intelligence during the diplomatic talks?" "Exactly," said Analyst Quinn. "She was not biological. She was an artificial intelligence that had been advising the Council for 300 years. While Ambassador Morrison sat in council meetings arguing about legal precedents, human intelligence services were mapping every Zelthian ship, every defense platform, every possible tactical advantage. Quinn pulled up more data. "But here is what really concerns me. The humans used only 17 ships for this operation. Our intelligence indicates they had at least 40 ships within quick striking distance. They used less than half their available force. Why would they do that?" Vex asked. "Because they only needed 17, the third advisor said. His name was Mir. He specialized in strategic planning. They calculated exactly what force was required and used that much. No more, no less. The rest stayed in reserve, ready to respond to other threats." Mir changed the display to show a map of the galaxy. Human territory was marked in blue. "This is what we thought human military deployment looked like. We assumed they kept most of their ships near Earth and their major colonies." Defensive positioning, the map changed. New information appeared, showing human ships spread throughout a much larger area. "This is what we now believe their actual deployment looks like. They have rapid response groups positioned throughout their entire sphere of influence. They can concentrate significant force anywhere within hours, not days or weeks." Vex stared at the map. His hands gripped the edge of his desk. "What does this mean for the Council?" "It means our entire defensive strategy is based on assumptions that are no longer valid," Court said bluntly. "We position forces for deterrence. We expect diplomatic warnings before military action. We rely on having time to mobilize and respond. The humans have demonstrated they will provide none of these things." Quinn added more information to the display. "Every species in this council now has to recalculate their risk assessment. Before, if you wanted to take disputed territory, the calculation was simple. Grab it, then sit through years of negotiations. Even if you had to give some back eventually, you still profited from the time you controlled it." She paused, making sure Vex was following. "Now the calculation is completely different. If you take human territory, you do not get years of profitable occupation. You get immediate military response. You get your forces destroyed or crippled. You get nothing but losses. And the humans made sure everyone knows this," Mir said. "They did not keep the New Portland operation secret. They made it very public. Every species with a military intelligence service is analyzing what happened. Every government is reconsidering their territorial ambitions. Vex was silent for a long time. Finally, he spoke. So by withdrawing from diplomacy, they actually made a diplomatic statement. They showed the entire galaxy what will happen if you cross humanity. This was never about New Portland specifically. It was about establishing a new set of rules. Correct, all three advisors said together. Court pulled up one more display. This showed combat footage from New Portland. Chancellor, you should see this. It shows how the humans treated Zelthian soldiers who surrendered. The footage showed human soldiers on the ground. They had surrounded a group of Zelthian troops. The Zelthians dropped their weapons and raised their limbs in surrender. The human soldiers immediately stopped shooting. They provided medical care to wounded Zelthians. They treated the prisoners well. This is important, Court said. The humans were brutal in combat but merciful in victory. They made it clear that resistance is pointless but surrender is safe. This is sophisticated psychological warfare. They are telling potential enemies that fighting is foolish but giving up is acceptable. Vex leaned back in his chair. All four of his eyes closed as he thought. We have made a terrible mistake. We assumed humans were like other young species, enthusiastic but inexperienced, idealistic but naive. We were wrong on every count. What do we do now? His aide asked. The young Crithian looked scared. We adapt, Vex said. We learn, because if we do not, humanity will teach the lesson again. And next time it might be our forces getting dismantled in 4 hours. He looked at his advisors. Contact Ambassador Morrison. Tell him I want a private meeting, not a council session, just the two of us. I need to understand what humans really want. Because if we keep operating on false assumptions, this will end badly for everyone. The advisors left to carry out his orders. Vex sat alone in his office staring at the tactical displays. For 2,000 years, the Crithians had been the masters of galactic diplomacy. They knew how to talk, how to negotiate, how to find compromises that satisfied everyone. But humans were not playing the same game. They had looked at the carefully constructed system of galactic politics and found it lacking. Instead of trying to become good at the old game, they had simply invented a new one. The question now was whether the rest of the galaxy could adapt to these new rules. Or would they learn the hard way, like the Zelthians, that the age of consequence-free aggression was over? Vex thought about the human expression he had learned. Actions speak louder than words. Humans had certainly proven that. They stopped talking and started acting, and their actions had sent a message that echoed across the entire galaxy. The message was simple, clear, undeniable. Do not take what belongs to humanity, because they will not ask for it back. They will not negotiate for its return. They will simply come and take it, immediately, completely, without mercy. And somehow, Vex thought with a mixture of fear and admiration, that might actually create more peace than 2,000 years of careful diplomacy ever had. Because now, for the first time, aggression had immediate costs. Real costs. Costs that made species think twice before crossing the line. The humans had not destroyed the galactic order. They had simply shown everyone what it really was. A system that protected the powerful and punished the patient. A system that rewarded those bold enough to take what they wanted and skilled enough to argue about it afterward. Humanity had looked at that system and said no. Not for us. We will not play that game. We will play a different game. A simpler game. A more honest game, and now everyone else had to decide. Would they adapt to the new rules? Would they reform the old system to address its flaws? Or would they test humanity's resolve and learn, like the Zelthians, that these new rules were not empty threats? Vex suspected most species would choose adaptation, because the alternative was too costly. And humans, despite being young and inexperienced in galactic politics, had demonstrated something that terrified the old powers. They knew how to win. 3 weeks had passed since New Portland. The galaxy was learning to adjust to its new reality, but the real test came sooner than anyone expected. The Fraxis Dominion was a small but aggressive species. They had been watching what happened to the Zelthians very carefully. They thought they understood the lesson. Do not mess with humans. That was clear enough, but what about everyone else? The Fraxis decided to find out. They sent military forces to capture a mining asteroid. The asteroid was in disputed space between Fraxis territory and another species called the Velkari Collective. It was exactly the kind of situation that the council had handled 1,000 times before. Both sides would file complaints. Lawyers would argue. Historians would present evidence. Eventually, maybe in 2 or 3 years, the council would make a decision. The Velkari followed the expected process at first. Their ambassador filed formal complaints with the council. The council scheduled preliminary hearings. Everything was going according to the old rules. Then something unexpected happened. At the first council session, the Velkari ambassador stood up. His name was Hell. He looked at the assembled council members and said something that made everyone go silent. The Velkari Collective is withdrawing from this mediation process. We will resolve this matter through direct action. The council chamber erupted into chaos. Vex tried to restore order, but his heart was sinking. This was what he had feared. Other species were copying the human approach. 2 days later, a Velkari fleet appeared at the edge of the asteroid system. They sent one simple message to the Fraxis forces. This is Velkari property. We are coming to take it back. You have 2 hours to evacuate. The Fraxis commander had studied what happened at New Portland. He knew what would happen if he resisted. The Velkari would destroy his ships quickly and efficiently. His soldiers would die for nothing. So he made the smart choice. He ordered his forces to withdraw. The Velkari took back their asteroid without firing a single shot. After that, the flood began. Species across the galaxy started withdrawing from diplomatic processes. Border disputes that had been stuck in council deliberations for years suddenly got resolved in days or weeks. Sometimes through actual fighting. More often through the threat of fighting, the old system was collapsing. Fast, Kyle Morrison watched these developments from his office at the human embassy. His assistant Lauren brought him reports every day. Each report showed more species abandoning the diplomatic process. Lauren put another data pad on his desk. The Thrall Confederacy just announced they are withdrawing from talks about the Kepler Junction trade route. How many is that this week? Kyle asked. 12 formal withdrawals. Intelligence says at least 20 more disputes are being settled outside the council system. Kyle leaned back in his chair. We broke something, sir. The whole diplomatic system. We showed everyone it was broken, and now they are all abandoning it at once. I am not sure we thought this through completely. Is that not what we wanted? Lauren asked. She sat down across from him. We wanted to show that endless negotiation was unacceptable. Yes. But I think I expected the council to reform itself gradually. Instead, the whole thing is falling apart, and I do not know what replaces it. Before they could discuss it further, Kyle's communication system signaled an incoming priority message. It was from High Chancellor Vex. He wanted an urgent meeting. They met in a private diplomatic suite away from the main council chambers. Vex looked terrible. His robes were wrinkled. His 4 eyes looked tired. He had clearly not been sleeping well. You have to help us, Vex said immediately. He did not waste time with formal greetings. Help with what? Kyle asked, though he already knew. Everything is falling apart. Species are withdrawing from negotiations all across the galaxy. Small conflicts are turning into military actions. The entire system we built is crumbling. Kyle kept his expression neutral. That is what we told you would happen. Your system was rewarding aggression. Now species are finding faster ways to resolve disputes. Faster? Vex's voice rose. You call this faster? Species are threatening each other with military force. Soon someone will miscalculate. Soon we will have real wars. Not border skirmishes. Real wars with millions dead. Kyle pulled up a display showing the recent incidents. Look at the actual data, Chancellor. Most of these disputes are resolving without major violence. The Velkari took back their asteroid without firing a shot. The Thrall settled their trade dispute with a show of force, but no actual combat. Species are learning that the threat of immediate action is often enough. Because everyone is terrified, Vex said. That is not peace, Ambassador. That is just fear keeping everyone in line. Kyle met his gaze steadily. And your system was peace through exhaustion. You wore both sides down until they were too tired to fight. Tell me, High Chancellor, which is more honest? A system based on deterrence or a system based on manipulation? Vex opened his mouth to argue, then closed it again. He had no good answer. What do you want? Vex finally asked. You have made your point. You have shown everyone that humans will not be pushed around. You have demonstrated your military capability. What is your endgame? Kyle thought carefully before answering. We want a system that works fairly. A system that does not reward the aggressor with years of profitable occupation, while lawyers argue. We want swift consequences for those who violate sovereignty. We want other species to understand that humans will defend their interests immediately, not eventually. So you want to remake the entire galactic order, Vex said bitterly. No, Kyle said quietly. We want you to fix it yourselves. We do not want to rule the galaxy, Chancellor. We just want to live in it without being exploited. The current system was broken. We proved it. Now you need to build something better. And if we cannot, then species will keep resolving their problems outside your system. Eventually, your council becomes irrelevant. Is that what you want? 2,000 years of Crithian diplomatic tradition thrown away because you refused to admit the system had flaws? Vex was silent for a long time. Finally, he spoke. What would you suggest? If you were in my position, what would you do? Kyle pulled up his own data pad. He had been thinking about this question for weeks. I would establish mandatory timelines for dispute resolution. No more years of deliberation. Set firm deadlines. I would create immediate sanctions for any species that uses military force during negotiations. Make aggression costly from day one, not years later, he continued. I would establish a rapid response force, multiple species contributing ships and personnel. When the council makes a decision, that force enforces it immediately. No waiting, no delays. Show aggressors that the council has teeth, not just words. Vex listened carefully. These are major reforms. Many species will resist, especially the older, more powerful ones. They benefit from the current system. Then they will resist, Kyle said. But look at what is happening now. The alternative to reform is collapse. Give them that choice. Reform the system voluntarily, or watch it die as species abandon it one by one. Vex stood up slowly. His four eyes studied Kyle with new understanding. You never intended to destroy the council, did you? You intended to force us to save it. Kyle smiled slightly. We believe in diplomacy, Chancellor. We just do not believe in letting it be used as a weapon. Make your system fair and fast, and humanity will participate gladly. Keep it broken, and we will keep working around it. The High Chancellor walked to the window and looked out at the council station. Ships from hundreds of species docked there. It represented everything the Crithians had built, everything they believed in. I will call an extraordinary session, Vex said finally. I will propose the reforms you suggested. I cannot promise they will pass. They will pass, Kyle said confidently, because every species in this galaxy is watching what happens when the council becomes irrelevant. They saw it happen to the Zelthians. They are seeing it happen across multiple systems right now. They will vote for reform because the alternative is chaos. Vex turned back to face him. You are either very wise or very lucky, Ambassador Morrison. Maybe both, Kyle said. Or maybe we just understood something that you forgot over 2,000 years of comfortable dominance. Systems that do not serve justice eventually fail. It does not matter how old they are or how well established. If they protect the wrong people and punish the right people, they will eventually collapse. We gave you a chance to fix yours before that happened. Take it, Chancellor. Build something better. Build something that works for everyone, not just the powerful and patient. Do that, and humanity will be your strongest supporter. As Kyle left the meeting, he felt cautiously optimistic. The galaxy was changing fast, maybe too fast. But change was necessary. The old system had lasted 2,000 years, but it had stopped serving its purpose. It needed to evolve or die. Now they would see if the council could adapt, if they could build something new from the ruins of the old system, and if they could do it before the entire galactic order collapsed into real chaos. 6 weeks after the meeting between Kyle and Vex, the Galactic Council gathered for an extraordinary session. The chamber was packed. Every single species had sent representatives. Even the ones who rarely attended council meetings showed up. Everyone wanted to witness this moment. Vex stood at the central podium. He wore his most formal ceremonial robes, but something about him was different. His posture was stronger. His eyes were clearer. He looked like someone who had made peace with a difficult decision. Honored representatives, he began. His voice carried through the translation systems to every species in the chamber. We gather today to vote on the most significant reforms to galactic diplomatic protocol in over 2,000 years. These reforms are necessary. They are overdue. And they will determine whether this council remains relevant in the centuries to come. The proposed reforms appeared on every screen in the chamber. Kyle read through them from his seat in the human delegation area. They were even more comprehensive than what he had suggested. Vex had taken the basic ideas and expanded them. Mandatory response timelines. Any territorial dispute brought before the Council must be resolved within 6 months. Not years, months. If the Council could not reach a decision in that time, an arbitration panel would make the final call. Immediate sanctions for occupation. Any species that used military force to seize disputed territory would face economic and diplomatic sanctions starting immediately. Not after the case was decided. Not after appeals were heard. Immediately fast-track processes for clear violations. When sovereignty was obviously violated, the Council could bypass normal procedures and issue immediate rulings. No more hiding behind legal technicalities while occupying someone else's territory. Most significantly, the establishment of the Council Enforcement Fleet. Multiple species would contribute ships and personnel to create a military force under Council command. When the Council made a decision, this fleet would enforce it, immediately, with force if necessary. The reforms were radical. They changed everything about how the Council operated. Some species would resist. Kyle knew that. The question was whether enough species would support the changes. Vex gave a long speech explaining each reform. He talked about the history of the Council. He acknowledged that the old system had worked for a long time, but he also admitted something that shocked many representatives. He admitted the system had flaws, serious flaws, flaws that humans had exposed. We built a system that valued process over justice, Vex said. His 4 eyes looked around the chamber. We created rules that unintentionally rewarded aggression with time. We allowed legal maneuvering to substitute for right action. Humanity showed us these flaws. Some of you resent them for that. I understand. But they did us a service. They forced us to look honestly at what we had created. He paused. Now we have a choice. We can cling to the old ways and watch species abandon this council one by one. Or we can adapt. We can build something better. Something that serves justice swiftly and fairly. I believe we must choose adaptation. I believe we must choose reform. The debate that followed was intense. Representatives from older, more powerful species argued against the reforms. They talked about tradition. They talked about the value of careful deliberation. They warned about moving too quickly, but representatives from smaller species spoke in favor of the reforms. They talked about being victims of the old system. They described how larger powers had used the slow diplomatic process to their advantage. They welcomed faster, fairer resolution of disputes. Interestingly, the Zelthian representative also voted in favor. Krath stood before the council and admitted something difficult. We tested the limits of the old system. We thought we could seize human territory and negotiate favorable terms while we occupied it. We were wrong. Humanity taught us a harsh lesson, but it was a lesson we needed to learn. These reforms will prevent other species from making the same mistake. The vote took hours. Each species had to formally declare their position. One by one, representatives stood and stated their vote. Kyle watched the tally climb on his personal display. Lauren sat next to him, also watching the numbers. "It is going to pass," she whispered. Kyle nodded. The momentum was clear. Species that had been silent for decades were speaking up in favor of change. The old powers were being outvoted by the many smaller species who had suffered under the old system. When the final vote was tallied, the reforms passed with 97% approval. The chamber erupted. Different species celebrated in different ways. Some cheered, some sang, some made harmonic sounds, some simply glowed brighter. It was chaos, but happy chaos. Kyle allowed himself a small smile. They had done it. Not by destroying the council, not by forcing change through military threats, but by demonstrating that change was necessary and then letting the council reform itself. After the session ended, Kyle found himself standing in an observation lounge overlooking the station's docking bays. Ships from hundreds of worlds came and went. It was beautiful in its diversity. Vex appeared beside him. The High Chancellor looked tired but satisfied. "You won," he said simply. Kyle shook his head. This was not about winning. It was about fixing what was broken. "You could have demanded more," Vex pointed out. "Greater representation on the council. Economic advantages. Military concessions. Instead, you pushed us to reform ourselves. Why?" "Because we do not want to rule the galaxy," Kyle said. We just want to live in it fairly. We want a system that works for everyone, not just the powerful. Forcing our will on you would have created resentment. Letting you build the solution yourselves creates buy-in. Now, these reforms are not human demands. They are council decisions. That makes them stronger. Vex was quiet for a moment. The reforms we passed today are actually stronger than what you originally suggested. Yes, Kyle agreed. Because you built them. You understood your system better than we ever could. You knew where the real weaknesses were. We just pointed out that weaknesses existed. You did the hard work of fixing them. Vex gestured toward the council chambers. I studied human history before this vote. Your wars, your conflicts, your long struggle toward civilization. You know violence very well. We do, Kyle admitted. That is why we know that decisive action is sometimes necessary. But we also learned that endless conflict is worse than difficult compromise. Your old system created paralysis. That had to change. But we never wanted chaos. We wanted something better, and if the new system fails, Vex asked. If species abuse these faster processes, then we adapt again, Kyle said. That is the real lesson here, Chancellor. Systems must evolve. Your council survived 2,000 years because it was willing to change when necessary. You just needed a reminder that change was needed. A rather forceful reminder, Vex said dryly. Would you have listened to a gentle one? Kyle asked. Vex made a sound that might have been laughter. Probably not. He looked out at the stars beyond the station. Humans are strange beings. You are simultaneously practical and idealistic, capable of great violence but also great mercy. I do not think the galaxy knows what to make of you yet. Good, Kyle said. Being predictable makes you vulnerable. We would rather keep everyone guessing a little. Vex turned to leave, then paused. Ambassador, one final question. When you withdrew from diplomacy at New Portland, were you not afraid of starting a war you might not win? Kyle considered the question carefully. We were terrified, he said honestly. But we were more afraid of what would happen if we did nothing. If we showed the galaxy that humans could be pushed around through legal tricks, that our patience could be exploited forever. Sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is nothing at all. He looked directly at Vex. We chose action knowing the risks, because the alternative was worse. We would have become permanent victims of a broken system. That was unacceptable. Vex nodded slowly. I understand now. Not just what you did, but why. And I think the galaxy is better for it. Thank you, Ambassador Morrison, for the lesson, however harsh it was. As Vex departed, Lauren rejoined Kyle at the window. The reform package is already being implemented, she reported. Fast-track procedures go live next week. The enforcement fleet begins formation next month. Species are already contributing ships. How are other species reacting? Kyle asked. Mixed reactions. Smaller powers are celebrating. They see this as protection against larger aggressors. The bigger powers are nervous but cooperative. Everyone is adapting, and Earth, what does Command think? Lauren smiled. They are calling it the most successful diplomatic mission in human history. We proved our point without starting a galactic war. We forced necessary reforms without making permanent enemies. Command is very pleased, Kyle laughed quietly. By ending all diplomacy. By ending bad diplomacy, Lauren corrected. There's a big difference, she was right. What humanity had done was not abandon diplomacy itself. They had simply refused to participate in a broken system. They had forced the galaxy to confront uncomfortable truths about their institutions. The result was not destruction. It was evolution. A new equilibrium was forming, based on different principles. Swift justice instead of endless deliberation. Clear consequences instead of negotiated compromises that favored aggressors. Respect earned through capability rather than ancient tradition. And through it all, humanity had demonstrated something more important than military. 3 months after the reforms passed, the galaxy was settling into its new normal. The changes were dramatic, but they were working. Disputes that would have taken years now resolved in weeks. Species that might have tested boundaries now thought twice before acting aggressively. The Council Enforcement Fleet held its first operation. A minor power called the Drexian Hegemony had seized a space station in neutral territory. They claimed historical rights. Under the old system, this would have triggered months of preliminary hearings. Under the new system, the Council convened an emergency session. They reviewed the evidence in 2 days. The verdict was clear. The Drexians had no legitimate claim. They were ordered to withdraw immediately. The Drexians refused. That was their mistake. The enforcement fleet arrived within 12 hours. Ships from 15 different species, all flying council colors. They surrounded the station and gave the Drexians 1 hour to evacuate. The Drexians, seeing the overwhelming force arrayed against them, chose wisdom over pride. They left peacefully. The entire incident, from initial complaint to resolution, took less than a week. Under the old system, it would have taken years, and the aggressor would have benefited from every day of delay. Kyle watched reports of the operation from his embassy office. He felt proud, not because humanity had forced this change, but because the Council had embraced it so completely. They had taken the basic ideas and made them work. Lauren brought him updated statistics. Formal complaints to the Council are down 40% from last year, but resolution rates are up 70%. Species are thinking more carefully before acting, and when disputes do arise, they get settled quickly. Any negative trends? Kyle asked. Some. 3 cases where the fast-track system made questionable rulings. The Council is already reviewing those procedures. They are adapting as problems arise, which is exactly what we hoped they would do. Kyle nodded. Perfection was not the goal. Improvement was, and the system was definitely improving. His communication console chimed. It was a message from Earth. Command wanted him to return for consultations. His tour as ambassador was ending. Someone else would take over the position. Before leaving Council Station, Kyle met with Vex one final time. They sat in the same private diplomatic suite where they had their crucial conversation months earlier. I hear you are returning to Earth, Vex said. My assignment here is complete. Someone else will take over as ambassador. You are leaving just when things are getting interesting, Vex said with what might have been humor. The reforms are working better than I expected. But we still face challenges. You will handle them, Kyle said confidently. You proved that you can adapt when necessary. That is the most important skill any leader can have. Vex was quiet for a moment. When you first withdrew from the New Portland negotiations, I thought you were being reckless, dangerous. I thought humanity would plunge the galaxy into war. And now? Kyle asked. Now I understand you were being strategic. Everything you did, every choice you made was calculated to force change without destroying the system. You walked a very narrow path, Ambassador. One mistake and things could have gone very differently. We took risks, Kyle admitted. But they were calculated risks. We studied your council for 30 years before we acted. We understood how it worked. We knew where the pressure points were. And we knew that showing you the problems was more effective than telling you about them. Vex leaned back in his seat. All 4 of his eyes focused on Kyle. Tell me something honestly. Were you bluffing at New Portland? If the Zelthians had fought harder, if they had inflicted serious casualties on your forces, would humanity have backed down? Kyle met his gaze steadily. No, we were not bluffing. If the Zelthians had fought to the last ship, we would have destroyed them. If other species had intervened, we would have fought them too. We were prepared to pay whatever price was necessary to establish the principle that aggression against humanity has immediate consequences. He paused. But we also worked very hard to make sure fighting was not necessary. We gave the Zelthians every opportunity to surrender. We made the outcome so obvious that resistance seemed pointless. We wanted to win decisively but mercifully, and we succeeded. That combination is rare, Vex observed. Most species are either too aggressive or too cautious. Humans seem to have found a balance, willing to fight when necessary but preferring not to, capable of great violence but also great restraint. We learned from hard experience, Kyle said. Humans fought each other for thousands of years before we reached the stars. We learned that some wars are necessary, but most are not. We learned that strength unused is more powerful than strength wasted. We learned that the best victory is one where your enemy chooses not to fight. At New Portland, we gave the Zelthians a choice. Fight and lose everything, or surrender and keep their lives and honor. Most of them chose wisely. That was the outcome we wanted. Not because we feared fighting, but because we knew that mercy creates better long-term outcomes than slaughter. Vex nodded slowly. I think I finally understand what makes humanity different. You are not more violent than other species. You are not more peaceful either. You are more practical. You do what works regardless of tradition or ideology. That is a fair assessment, Kyle agreed. We do not fight for glory. We do not negotiate for the sake of negotiation. We simply try to achieve our goals using whatever methods work best in each situation. Sometimes that means fighting. Sometimes it means talking. Sometimes it means refusing to participate in systems we consider broken. The High Chancellor stood and walked to the window. Council Station stretched out before them, busy with activity. That practicality will serve humanity well in the galaxy, but it also makes you unpredictable. That worries some species. Good, Kyle said simply. Predictability gets you exploited. We would rather be respected and feared a little than understood and taken advantage of. Vex turned back to face him. Will humanity stay engaged with the Council, now that the reforms are in place? Absolutely. As long as the system works fairly, we will participate fully. We have no desire to stand apart from galactic civilization. We just refuse to be victims of it. Keep the system fair and fast, and humanity will be one of your strongest supporters. And if the system fails again, if it starts to drift back toward the old ways, then we will point that out, Kyle said, loudly. And if pointing it out does not work, we will act, just like we did before. We will never again tolerate a system that rewards aggression with time, or uses legal complexity to justify injustice. He smiled slightly, but I do not think that will happen. You have proven you can change when necessary, and now you have a system with built-in flexibility. Problems will arise, but you will fix them. That is what healthy institutions do. Vex extended one of his hands in the Crithian gesture of respect. Thank you, Ambassador Morrison, for the lesson, for the push we needed, and for trusting us to build something better rather than trying to control the outcome. Kyle shook the offered hand. Thank you for listening, Chancellor, for having the courage to admit the system needed change. Many leaders would have doubled down on tradition rather than embracing reform. You chose wisdom over pride. The galaxy is better for it. As Kyle left Council Station for the last time, he stood on the observation deck of the human transport ship. The station grew smaller behind them. He thought about everything that had happened since New Portland. Lauren stood beside him. Do you think the changes will last? She asked. Some will. Some will not. Systems always evolve. The important thing is that we proved change was possible. We showed that age and tradition do not make something right. We demonstrated that young species can force necessary reforms in ancient institutions. He gestured toward the station. They built something better because we made the old system untenable, not through destruction but through demonstration. We showed them what was broken and gave them the motivation to fix it. That is a lesson the whole galaxy learned. What happens next? Lauren asked. Kyle smiled. That is up to them now. We have done our part. We established humanity's position in the galactic order. We proved that we will not be pushed around or taken advantage of. We forced necessary reforms. Now we let the system work. And if someone tests humanity again, then we respond exactly as we did at New Portland. Immediately, decisively, overwhelmingly. We have established a reputation now. Smart species will respect it. Foolish ones will learn from hard experience. Either way, humanity has made its position clear. The transport ship jumped to faster than light travel. Council Station vanished from view. Kyle thought about the journey ahead. Returning to Earth, debriefing command. Possibly a new assignment somewhere else in human space. But part of him would always remember this moment. Standing in the council chamber, making the announcement that humanity was done talking, walking out while chaos erupted behind him. That moment changed everything. It set in motion events that reformed an entire galactic civilization. Not through war, not through conquest, but through simple, honest refusal to participate in a broken system. Sometimes, Kyle reflected, the most powerful diplomatic move is to stop being diplomatic, to refuse to play by rules that are fundamentally unfair, to demonstrate through action rather than words that some things are unacceptable. Humanity had ended all diplomacy at New Portland. And in doing so, 1 year after New Portland, the galaxy had settled into a new rhythm. The reforms were working better than even their strongest supporters had hoped. Territorial disputes that once dragged on for years now resolved in weeks. Aggressive species thought twice before crossing boundaries. The Council enforcement fleet had conducted 12 operations, all successful, most without firing a shot. Admiral Peter Hayes commanded one of humanity's contributions to the enforcement fleet. He sat in his ready room aboard the warship Unity, reading reports from across the galaxy. Every report told the same story. The system was working. His communications officer knocked on the door. Admiral, we are receiving a priority message from Council Station. High Chancellor Vex wishes to speak with you directly. Peter activated the secure communication channel. Vex appeared on the screen, his 4 eyes showing concern. Admiral Hayes, we have a situation. The Corvan Empire has seized 3 mining colonies belonging to the Theran Republic. They are claiming ancient territorial rights. Peter studied the tactical data that accompanied the message. The Corvans were a major power, not as large as the Crithians, but significant. They had been quiet since the reforms passed. Now they were testing the system. How many forces do they have in place? 32 warships, 8 orbital defense platforms, approximately 10,000 ground troops across the 3 colonies. Peter whistled softly. That was a serious commitment. The Corvans were not playing games. What does the Council want? We have reviewed the evidence under fast-track procedures. The Corvan claims are without merit. These colonies belong to the Theran Republic. The Council has issued an order for immediate Corvan withdrawal. They have refused. The enforcement fleet is authorized to remove them by force if necessary. Peter nodded. This was the moment everyone had been waiting for. A major power directly challenging the new system. How they handled this would determine whether the reforms were real or just words. How many ships can you give me? 47. Vessels from 12 species are already en route to your position. You will have overall command. The Council has authorized you to use whatever force is necessary to enforce our decision. Understood. Unity and her battle group will coordinate with the other fleet elements. We will resolve this quickly. Admiral, Vex said, his voice careful. The galaxy is watching this. If the Corvans resist and you fail, the entire reform system collapses. Every aggressive power will see that the Council has no real teeth. We will not fail, Peter said simply. The Corvans will have one chance to withdraw peacefully. If they refuse, we will remove them, just like we did at New Portland. The principle remains the same. Aggression has immediate consequences. The communication ended. Peter called his senior staff to the ready room. They reviewed the tactical situation carefully. The Corvans had positioned their forces well. They clearly expected a fight. They had studied New Portland and prepared accordingly. But they had also made assumptions. They assumed the enforcement fleet would be slow to respond. They assumed political differences would delay action. They assumed a mixed fleet of different species would struggle to coordinate. They were wrong on all counts. The enforcement fleet assembled within 36 hours. 47 ships from 12 different species, all flying Council colors, all operating under unified command. Peter reviewed the force composition with satisfaction. The fleet included the best elements from every major power. They had trained together for months. They knew how to work as a unit. The fleet arrived at the first contested colony. Peter opened a communication channel to the Corvan commander. This is Admiral Peter Hayes of the Council Enforcement Fleet. You are in violation of Council Resolution 473. You have 12 hours to evacuate all forces from Theran territory. This is your only warning. The Corvan commander appeared on screen. He was a large being with scales and multiple arms. We do not recognize Council authority over these colonies. Our claim is legitimate. We will not withdraw. Then you force us to remove you, Peter said calmly. Your forces will be given every opportunity to surrender. But if you resist, we will destroy your military capability completely. The choice is yours. The Corvan cut the communication. 12 hours later, his forces remained in place. No evacuation, no movement toward compliance. They were calling the Council's bluff. Peter issued the order. All ships execute Battle Plan Alpha. Target command and control systems first. Disable, do not destroy unless absolutely necessary. Give them every chance to surrender. The enforcement fleet moved with practiced precision. Just like at New Portland, they identified critical systems and struck simultaneously. Corvan communication arrays went dark in the first minute. Point defense systems followed 30 seconds later. Power distribution networks were severed with surgical accuracy. The Corvan ships tried to fight back. They were well trained and brave, but they were facing a coordinated multi-species fleet that had trained specifically for this kind of operation. Within 2 hours, half the Corvan fleet was disabled. The other half was surrounded and unable to maneuver effectively. Peter opened communications again. Corvin Commander, your position is hopeless. Surrender now and your people will be treated well. Continue to resist, and we will be forced to destroy your remaining ships. You have achieved nothing except casualties among your own forces. End this. This time, a different Corvin appeared on screen. The original commander had been injured when his flagship was disabled. I am Second Commander Vren. We acknowledge the situation. We will surrender our forces. The battle ended. Corvin ships powered down their weapons. Ground forces laid down their arms. The enforcement fleet moved in to take control of the colonies and evacuate Corvin personnel. Peter made sure the Corvins were treated properly. Wounded received medical care. Prisoners were housed comfortably. Ships were allowed to depart with their crews once weapons were disabled. This was not about revenge or humiliation. It was about enforcing council decisions fairly and firmly. The operation lasted 72 hours from start to finish. 3 Theran colonies liberated, Corvin forces removed with minimal casualties on both sides. Council authority established beyond question. Vex contacted Peter after the operation concluded. Admiral, the Council wishes to express its gratitude. You executed the operation flawlessly. More importantly, you proved that the reforms have real teeth. The fleet did its job, Peter replied, but the real credit goes to the Council for having the courage to enforce its own decisions. A year ago, this situation would have dragged on for years while the Corvins profited from occupation. Today it was resolved in 3 days. That is the difference the reforms made. How do you think other species will react? Vex asked. They will think very carefully before testing the system again. The Corvins were a major power. If even they cannot resist Council enforcement, smaller powers will not try. And larger powers will understand that aggression brings immediate military response from a unified multi-species fleet. The deterrent value of this operation cannot be overstated. After the communication ended, Peter stood on the Bridge of Unity and looked at the fleet around him. Ships from 12 different species working together perfectly. A year ago, this would have been impossible. Different species did not trust each other enough to operate under unified command. But humanity had changed the equation by demonstrating, at New Portland, that immediate action was both possible and necessary. They had created the impetus for real reform. The enforcement fleet was the result, a symbol that the galaxy had learned a crucial lesson. His first officer approached. Admiral, we are receiving congratulatory messages from dozens of species. Even some that voted against the reforms are expressing support for what we did here. Peter nodded. Success changes minds faster than arguments. We proved the system works. Now everyone wants to be part of it. Do you think this will last? The first officer asked. Or will we eventually drift back to the old ways? That depends on us, Peter said. On whether we stay vigilant. Systems do not maintain themselves. They require constant effort and adaptation. But as long as species remember the lessons of New Portland and today, as long as aggression faces immediate consequences, the system will hold. He looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, other species were watching, learning, understanding that the galaxy had changed, that the old ways of slow diplomacy and consequence-free aggression were gone. Humanity had taught the galaxy a simple lesson. Actions have consequences, immediate consequences, certain consequences. Species that respected this principle would thrive. Species that tested it would learn, as the Zelthians and Corvins had, that the new order was not negotiable. Back on Earth, Kyle Morrison watched news reports of the Corvin operation. He smiled as he read the analysis. Commentators across the galaxy were praising the swift resolution. Even former critics of the reforms were acknowledging their effectiveness. His wife came into the room. Still following galactic politics? She asked with amusement. Hard to stop. We set something in motion out there. I like to see how it develops. Are you satisfied with how things turned out? Kyle thought about the question. More than satisfied. We took a risk at New Portland. We stopped talking and started acting. We forced the galaxy to confront uncomfortable truths about their system. And instead of creating chaos, we catalyzed real,